It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, declares she'll end the UK's golden ticket in a sweeping overhaul of the asylum system. Donald Trump says he'll sue the BBC for billions of dollars as the corporation apologises but declines to compensate him over a misleading speech edit.
We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week.
Meanwhile, President Trump angrily breaks with a long-time political ally who's become a vocal critic over the Epstein files. An elderly British woman is killed after Storm Claudia hits a campsite in Portugal. The storm also had a devastating impact in South Wales, where a major incident has been declared. In sport, Scotland's World Cup hopes still in the balance, despite losing 3-2 in Greece. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening, welcome to the programme. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is to declare an end to what she says is the UK's golden ticket in a sweeping overhaul of the asylum system. Ms Mahmood says the changes, to be formally announced this week, will curb the far more generous terms that the UK has offered to asylum seekers than other countries in Europe. Refugee protection will now be temporary, regularly reviewed and revoked if a person's home country is deemed safe to return to again. Our political correspondent Amanda Acaster joins us live now. And Amanda, new details of the Home Secretary's asylum overhaul and an end to, as Shabana Mahmood is putting it, to the UK's golden ticket.
Yes, so the Home Office describes Shabana Mahmood, the still relatively new Home Secretary, as a woman in a hurry. She's someone who's had the job for 73 days, and we're told she's due to announce what will be the most sweeping reforms to tackle illegal migration in modern times, effectively since the Second World War. And as you say, ending what she describes as the golden ticket, which sees the UK as the most popular destination of choice for asylum seekers because of the more generous terms offered to people if they come to the UK. Now, these measures are partly inspired by Denmark, which is also led by a centre-left government, but where the tough measures they've introduced there have reduced the number of people applying for asylum there to the lowest number in 40 years. But as you say, the key measure there is about no longer giving asylum seekers permanent rights to stay in the UK, only offering them permanent residency as long as there's still a dangerous situation in their home countries. And once their home countries are deemed to be safe, then they'll be deported back home again. Now, if they do want to stay in the UK permanently, they'll have to wait for at least 20 years to have the right to settle here, although we're told that there could potentially be ways of shortening that through work or studying, and that's 4 times longer than the current standard length of time, which is just 5 years. We're also told the government will be changing the rules so that they'll be able to remove benefits and accommodation given to asylum seekers who could work but don't, or who have a criminal record. Now, the Home Secretary says that this is important because illegal migration is tearing the country apart. The images of people coming here in small boats over and over again and making people think that the government can't act as a force for good. And she says in the UK, over the past year or so, the number of people making asylum claims has gone up by 18%, whereas in the rest of the EU, it's gone down by 13%. So something needs to change. Now, she's certainly being presented as the hard woman of politics here, talking tough, but she's got quite a serious message. She says she knows there are people in the party effectively who will be concerned about this, who will see these measures as immoderate, but she basically says she's got an ultimatum. If you don't like this, you won't like what follows me. Something darker will follow, she says. Now, this is a bit of a nod to the policies of the Tories and Reform UK, who effectively will end asylum claims for illegal migrants arriving in the country. But of course, the government are under huge pressure to deliver on this. We know the number of small boats that keep coming. We know the anger over asylum hotels, the growing popularity of Reform UK. There are many on the left of Labour who won't like this. Already people have described the Danish approach as racist. in the past. We know refugee charities are also very concerned. They say that this will end the possibility of people being able to settle calmly and integrate into British society through expecting this very, very long period before anyone has even the hope of settling here permanently. But fundamentally, after a week where the governments have been in so much chaos politically, they're hoping that if they can try and show that they can grip the narrative and they have a concrete policy to change the direction of travel on this key area of policy, it might be a way through the political crisis they're currently in. And as for Shabana Mahmood, a lot of this language is certainly positioning her as a prime leadership candidate in future.
Amanda, thank you for all your analysis there, Amanda Acas. And as the Home Secretary prepares to set out those significant changes to the asylum system, Shabana Mahmood is amongst Trevor Phillips' guests tomorrow morning. Trevor will also be joined by the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, and the exiled Belarusian opposition leader and activist, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, will also join the programme. That's all on Sunday morning with Trevor Phillips from 8:30 a.m. 4 people have been arrested after police officers were assaulted during protests outside a hotel housing people seeking asylum. Supporters of an anti-immigration group called the Bristol Patriots arrived outside the Mercure Hotel in Redcliffe, where hundreds of counter-protesters were already present. The BBC's battle with the world's most powerful man intensified further today, with Donald Trump declaring that he'll sue the corporation for as much as $5 billion. The US president says the apology for misleadingly editing a speech he gave isn't enough. But while the BBC fights for its reputation, a media lawyer has told Sky News that he believes it stands on solid ground in any legal showdown with President Trump. Sky's Ashish Joshi reports.
By the time the wheels touched down ahead of his weekend in Mar-a-Lago, President Trump's self-imposed BBC deadline had already passed. But his threatened legal action against the broadcaster hasn't gone away. President Trump has his apology, but that's not enough.
We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week.
So you're ready to take...
Well, I think I have to do it. I mean, they've even admitted that they cheated.
The BBC says it did not mean to misrepresent President Trump in an edit of a speech he made in January 2021. It was, they say, unintentional. And it said it's sorry, and 2 of its most senior executives have resigned. But it insists there was no defamation. And some observers think the media giant's lawyers might be right.
Did they think that the president's reputation was really damaged by that program? Or was it actually the judicial findings in America, the 9 federal judges who said he's responsible for incitement, the Washington, D.C. court, and all the associated publications in America where it was seen, as opposed to a program that wasn't seen?
The BBC will be urgently considering all of its options, including the damage to its credibility and reputation. Its very public battle with the world's most powerful man could cost more than money.
And I would be very surprised if there weren't some settlement talks to get this thing off the BBC's desk, because it's going to hang over them otherwise. Litigation is always a commercial decision and it's a reputational decision. So the BBC will have to look at the cost involved in doing that, and it would be a very long and very costly exercise.
President Trump has taken on the media before, winning tens of millions of dollars against some of the biggest names in the business in at least 3 separate cases. In July, Paramount agreed to pay President Trump $16 million to settle a lawsuit over a 2024 CBS interview with Kamala Harris, the 2024 Democratic presidential nominee. Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, also settled with the president to the tune of $25 million after he sued over the suspension of his accounts in the wake of the 6th January riots. And in 2024, President Trump sued American broadcaster ABC and its news host, George Stephanopoulos, after the anchor falsely referred to the president being found liable for rape in an interview.
The BBC made a mistake. Whether or not it was a deliberate mistake is the key issue. I think I'm very much like, I simply don't believe that it was a deliberate mistake. And under US libel law, if you're writing about public figures or broadcasting about public figures, you are protected. So Trump has to prove that this was actual malice.
The row is threatening to spill beyond the borders of New Broadcasting House. The Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy has supported the BBC, but now the public broadcaster might be forced to seek the support of the Prime Minister. But there's no guarantee Keir Starmer will want to get involved, or indeed that President Trump can be persuaded to step back. The BBC accepts it made a mistake. It will need to think very carefully about its next step, because it can't afford another one. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Our US correspondent David Blevins joins me now from Washington, D.C. So, David, the president not backing down from this row with the BBC, which some see as a welcome diversion from the allegations around the Epstein files.
Yes, quite a statement from the president, increasing his demand for compensation from the BBC from $1 billion to somewhere between $1 and $5 billion. Legal experts here in the United States are sceptical about his chances of winning any courtroom victory. But for Donald Trump, this may be less about winning and more about the optics, because it does allow him to reinforce his message of fake news. And one of the people who preached that message for him was Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman from Georgia, a die-hard supporter of Donald Trump, darling of the MAGA movement. But he has cut her loose in spectacular style. It's a big split in the coalition around him. He took to Truth Social to call her a raving lunatic and wacky Marjorie. She hit back, claiming that text messages she'd sent Donald Trump about Jeffrey Epstein were what sent him, in her words, over the edge. Now, both of these battles pose risk for Donald Trump. By taking on the BBC, he could bring fresh scrutiny to the words he did speak on January 6th, 2021, but he will present this battle as a fight against persecution. And by taking on Marjorie Taylor Greene, he risks alienating some of his own base. But it certainly tells them who wields the power when it comes to political survival.
David, thank you. A British woman has died after what's been described by authorities as a tornado that swept through a holiday campsite in Portugal. The 85-year-old hasn't been named. Several others were injured when strong winds swept through the park in the Algarve. Witnesses say structures were sent flying and dozens of caravans were overturned. Storm Claudia brought heavy rain and strong winds to Portugal and Spain before moving north to the UK, where it's caused flooding across England and Wales. 4 severe flood warnings and 2 alerts remain in place as Wales recovers from the effects of the storm. Our correspondent Shimon Freeman-Powell reports from near the Welsh border.
A town under deluge, communities cut off, cars submerged and residents forced to flee after a month's worth of rain fell overnight in Monmouth. The relentless downpours brought by Storm Claudia left emergency services battling rising waters to help those trapped in flooded homes. The risk to life and disruption to travel meant a major incident was declared and hundreds of flood alerts issued. Businesses were forced to shut up shop and residents were urged to stay indoors and avoid all travel.
All our stock round here is completely ruined.
Further upstream in England, this riverside village in Herefordshire bore the brunt of the flooding.
It all started about 2 o'clock. We noticed that there was some flooding coming in, but not through the flood defences. We tried our best to keep the water out as long as we could. Firefighters came to help, and it just wasn't good enough, and then we were evacuated. It got extremely high, so it even came over our wall and the flood defences. It was that bad.
When the river here burst its banks, it forced residents to leave the area. The relentless rain has now stopped and the clean-up operation from the community is underway. But the cost caused by Storm Claudia is yet to be calculated. And this young farmer fears for the worst.
It can be devastating, absolutely devastating. It could ruin a farm if it's that bad. Like loss of livestock, an actual loss of arable ground for your crops. So yeah, it is a huge impact flooding.
The rain has largely eased and the damage is now being assessed. But with freezing temperatures on the way, the worst of winter may still lie ahead. Shaman Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Thousands of climate protesters have sweltered in the Brazilian sun outside the COP30 climate summit, demanding faster action to avoid environmental catastrophe. Inside the talks, negotiators reached the halfway point of intense efforts to turn years of promises into action. Our climate reporter, Victoria Seabrook, reports from Belém.
Tired of lip service, they say they've come to demand justice. Indigenous peoples have defined the image, the tone and the soundtrack to this year's COP30 climate talks in Brazil, culminating in a mass protest on the streets of Belém, joined by groups from across Latin America and beyond, fighting big industry like soy that's encroaching on their territory.
We Kayapo do not accept any of this being built on indigenous land.
And asking polluters to pay up.
We're here to say the governments need to make the oil and gas companies pay up for the climate destruction. They've made billions in profits every day since the last 50 years.
They're following those lurking in the shadows at the COP30 talks. This year, more fossil fuel executives attending than any other country apart from Brazil. But if they're calling for a death knell for oil and gas, they might be waiting some time.
Halfway through negotiations and talks are still deadlocked over what to even focus on next week. Some countries backing a plan to wean the world off fossil fuels. Others don't even want to say the words out loud. Still taking baby steps forward. And what people here want are massive, great strides.
This year has seen protests back with a bang, following a 3-year hiatus when COP was hosted by countries where taking to the streets like this is all but banned. And these talks have arguably done more to boost Indigenous rights than any other before, working on a fund to pay them to keep their forests standing. But they know the world is watching and have thrust themselves into the spotlight. And for many, just being seen isn't enough.
At least it makes visible to the world that we are facing conflicts on our lands. COP offers a tiny space for Indigenous people, and we want to be more involved. We want to have more influence, and that's why we believe we have to take ownership of these spaces. We can't stay out of it.
In the meantime, the protests here reflecting the chaos, the mess and the beauty of Brazil, the COP talks and the world beyond. Victoria Seabrook, Sky News, Belém.
A railway worker who protected passengers during a mass stabbing has been discharged from hospital. LNER staff member Samir Zatouni, known as Sam, was critically injured during the attack on board a train in Cambridgeshire on the 1st of November. His family has thanked the public for its support, adding that the 48-year-old has a significant recovery ahead. It's thought the former Chancellor George Osborne could be a contender to become the next chairman of HSBC Holdings. Our city editor, Mark Kleinman, has exclusively revealed Mr Osborne, who was Chancellor from 2010 until 2016, was approached during the summer about taking on what is one of the world's top banking jobs. The special Vatican audience was billed as a celebration of cinema and its ability to inspire and unite. Leo encouraged the filmmakers and celebrities gathered in a frescoed Vatican audience hall to use their art to include marginal voices. People with learning difficulties have been found to be at greater risk from cancer, including later diagnoses and poorer treatment outcomes. Researchers warn there's an urgent need to improve detection and care. Our correspondent Emma Birchley has been finding out more.
3 years ago, Annabelle Downey was told she had breast cancer. Not only that, it had already spread to her shoulder and spine. But she'd been to the doctor time and again.
I went about my back and they kept saying it was old age. And then there was one day I couldn't walk. Had to end up getting rushed in the hospital.
Annabelle says she simply wasn't taken seriously. Her learning disability making it harder to communicate just how bad the pain could be. And she hadn't considered the breast pain she had could be linked.
people with learning disabilities, they can't explain themselves properly. And I'm just saying because of myself. And they don't get listened. They keep thinking that they're crying wolf.
But Annabelle is not alone. A study has revealed that people with learning disabilities are about half as likely to be referred for urgent investigation, despite having red flag symptoms possibly caused by cancer. And by then it's more likely to have spread and become untreatable. In fact, most of those with a severe learning disability or Down syndrome are dying within 4 years of diagnosis, compared to 9 years for those without.
What we found were major disadvantages across the entire cancer care pathway. We found that people with a learning disability were at much higher risk of cancer, particularly at younger ages. They were 70% more likely to get cancer before the age of 50. But despite that higher risk, when they went to see their GPs with symptoms suggestive of cancer, so those red flag symptoms, they were much less likely to be referred on to a specialist.
The findings follow the most comprehensive investigation into the issue ever carried out. A spokesperson for the Department of Health and Social Care said, "It's unacceptable that people with learning disabilities aren't getting the care they need. This government inherited a health system in crisis, and we're working at pace to improve cancer care, including for people with learning disabilities. We're already seeing progress, with 193,000 more patients having cancer diagnosed or ruled out on time since last year." Annabelle's cancer is being kept in check with chemo, but she's no longer able to work and relies on 24/7 care at home. What's so hard is she knows if someone had listened, the outcome might have been so different.
Keep voicing your opinion and say, look, I need something done.
Emma Birchley, Sky News.
Time now to get all the very latest Sky Sports news with Josh.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
The club made a great pitch to me, that they wanted me. They gave me a 4-year contract. All the stops were out. They made me feel really welcome.
We arrived at the airport there in Madrid, and there were 30, 40, 50 journalists, cameras, and we thought, oh, they come for this movie star, you know. Suddenly we see, Jesus Christ, Jimmy, it's for you.
It's always difficult losing a great player. Jimmy, for me, was always a world-class striker. Probably not talked about as much, I don't think, as to some of the other great strikers, but I was fortunate enough to play with him.
We obviously made a very good profit on him. If you just take the business transaction, not the football emotion, the transaction was a good deal because we bought him for 2 and we sold him for £12 million.
In 2 years, got 6 times their money. I was not a big earner at the time at the club. So for them, it was a big gain.
He's settling into his new surrounds, the player renamed Judas Floyd Money in the Bank when he was drummed out of Ellen Road. But stories of excessive demands were fictional, according to Atletico's new signing.
I was supposed to stay there. I was supposed to sign a new contract and feel happy. If they can ask 12 million for a player, the rest is all clear.
Were you asking to be the most highly paid player in the Premiership, as we're led to believe?
No, don't believe the figures at all. Don't believe the figures at all.
You didn't want £40,000 a week? Would have been nice, but is that what you were demanding?
That's not what I asked.
Reading the text last night, that was nothing about money from his agent. Well, Jesus, lads, honestly, if that wasn't about money, I don't know, then maybe I'm getting it wrong when he set me there. A lot of you have written good articles about it. And all I'd like to say is that I've seen quotes of 45,000. I think you're being modest to Jimmy on that one, honestly. I wouldn't like to say, but I think you'd be disappointed if you're only saying that, honestly.
Did you feel you had to speak out publicly for the club?
Yes, you have, because we didn't want to sell a top player. I had one of the best number 9s that you could wish to have. It puts me under pressure then. I've got to go out and buy and put your head on the block to buy a number 9. Did we sell a bad player? No, we sell the top player.
It did disappoint me. How everything went, it made me look bad in front of the fans. Was not necessary. The perception that people have of me, the difficult person, blah, 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 that is never there. I would have tried to find a solution.
What we didn't do is say he was a difficult character. I think we alluded to his desire for more money, or other people can put words around what you attribute to people who are just desperate for cash, and we couldn't afford it given we'd found him in the first place. Maybe naive on my part to believe that players wouldn't have the head turned for cash. So yeah, it was difficult, and I understand why Jimmy would think that we publicly probably let him down. But you've got to manage, and frankly I felt let down as well. We'd just signed him, I'd offered him 100% pay increase, but he wanted a 300% pay increase, and I couldn't afford it.
That was for me the fuel, that kept me going. That somebody didn't want me, and I now had in the back of my mind, I'm going to show you what you're missing.
His form has been nothing short of sensational, fueling stories that Jimmy may join the Dutch Revolution led by the former Ajax coach Louis van Gaal at Barcelona.
It would be a nice fantasy, but this is a big club and I don't see myself leaving on this moment.
I had no relegation clause. When you go to Atletico Madrid, you never think that you're going to get relegated. That never came in my mind, and it became harder and harder.
And then there was a lot of interest. A couple of clubs moved in for Jimmy, and even Barcelona.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. When we come back, I'll be joined by the entrepreneur and PR consultant, Leon Amirali, and the journalist and author, Christina Patterson. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Mail on Sunday, their headline, White House fury at Trump monster jibe in showpiece BBC lecture. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.